Michael Crosby for president and presidential candidate panel, respective actions. This is a blend. This is covering not only transitional items, but this is covering multi-department areas as well as an array of information from first-hand investigation, as well as other items that might be referred to as policy changes, to give a better idea as to what to expect. So the generalization on the scope here is that the covering of the material will seem, in many cases, very generalized, but there are underlying reasons why the items are addressed. Constitutionality is addressed repeatedly. The understanding that we have insurrection, mass rebellion, and invasional forces as factors that might be considered in many different contexts, which could also include mass spying, mass espionage, being both foreign, domestic, and industrial. Items here are addressing Justice Department, judicial areas, and various other areas. They are not limited to any particular level of government. So this can go, all this is going to, in the scope of this, we have also, bottom line, all the way localized, county, state, federal, city, whatever. On items involving different types of policy and respective areas, I continue with judges. Respective on judges, Justice Department, Judicial, etc. The understanding that there are various times that we have judges that have committed certain crimes. There's a difference between judges that are committing errors in law versus judges that are committing out-and-out crime. These happen in many ways. We have judges that are aiding and abetting, respectively parties that are involved in acts of treason, acts of rebellion, acts connected to parties who are linked to foreign espionage, domestic espionage. When we have a judge that doesn't understand and does something in filing, such as tells a party that has criminal charges that they want them to sign off respective to any criminal charges being handled, this is coercion. This is a crime. Because when we are in a situation that has insurrection identified, there can be no excuses that the insurrection can have a wide area of occurrences, respective to archives and other various areas. We have, at my level, where we have a recognition that it's going to change respective to breaches. What are breaches? How these breaches occur, and how to deal with minimizing breach effects. So if we have a judge that deals with a case, let's say it has a lot of different elements, but archive is one of them. It can also be the process of elections or candidates. Doesn't matter what level candidate. Obviously, higher level candidates are more serious. When we have a situation that also deals with a RICO environment, this has to be considered because essentially many acts of rebellion, insurrection, are also identifiable as a cross identifier as also a RICO situation. So here we have an additional understanding that has to be considered possibly or mandatorily naturally encompassed by reason to believe. So when you have judges that are practicing different ways of doing things, there's a lot of things that are not valid. For instance, all costs are covered by the United States. The reason the term is used, respective, in the Constitution and Articles is that it's an understanding that when you have invasion, insurrection, rebellion, that you're going to have people being dislodged and displaced. This means that literally the concept of people having home addresses or having an address available needs to be understood that that is not necessarily an item that a person has to reveal. Now, this might sound ridiculous to many people, but you have to understand people have to maintain security. So there is not necessarily a logical reason for any filer to have to reveal their address. Why? Modern times. We're now modern times. This means people can reveal things such as phone numbers. Now, even revealing phone numbers can also have problems, but revealing phone numbers means that you have what? You're protecting RICO protection procedures. With a phone number, you also have something else, the possibility of literally having 24/7 access for key types of communication. You also have reasons, I can go into at another time, of why phones are also problematic, but and it's a two-way street. If we're dealing with judges coercing parties into reducing their case, converting a case, that is unacceptable. That is coercion. When dealing with parties that are candidates, again, definitely coercion. When dealing with parties who have an archive, again, definitely coercion. When dealing with parties that have classified information, research that can be considered possibly involving national security. So this is both copyright, patent, so forth, etc. Software classified, considered a copyright form. Again, we have a situation where parties have to be careful in revealing something to the court sometimes, because sometimes it's important to reveal in some way what you have so that a judge can make a proper decision. Yet we have the situation where all courts are permanent breaches, keeping an understanding that it's impossible for any agency, including the courts, to not be breached. When we have situations involving the FBI firing 170 people in 1 year, then we're looking at basically they were fired because of a spy effect. They were either deemed spies, charged with spying, or charges were short of being competent of conviction, or they were basically in conjunction respective to a short number of people. In other words, 4 people in the module. They can't ascertain totally who and what all the breaches are. Therefore, you get rid of the entire module. This means you can have somebody who's innocent. Now we have a new mechanism. It's called fMRI lie detectors. We have a way for parties to clear their name, so to speak. So that option is now on the table. So effectively, willing witnesses is a big aspect that is going to be implemented under my administration. So effectively, this would mean once it does go into effect that parties in the past can opt to say they want to do a willing witness item and that the former concerns are not legitimate and they can apply for update. Now, we're also going to be able to have parties that could be eliminated from employment or temporarily eliminated from employment because of concerns. That can be complicated because the situation might require that they can no longer be associated with certain activity or any activity because they are suspect on a breach situation. That there also will have the qualifications for the FMRI as well, but implementing that's going to be a difficult item when dealing with different levels of phase and priority of where and when items need to be dealt with. So it depends on what the situation is going to be. So that is something that, that's as much honesty as I can give in the realism of the way some of that can work. I'm going to go ahead and mention it would seem that I have a total of 7 convictions on judges, expecting essentially at this point 14 to 20 convictions on judges. So, so people will understand it's not a game here. Some of these are major items. Some of these are actually treason. So those are in a system where I've disclosed something about those publicly at a certain level, and they will continue to be processed. Many items will go through 3 more additional stages before finalization, but they don't necessarily have to do that. It depends on the individual item on what's going to happen there. Some of them might have not what would be one of the next 3 stages, but it might have a specialized review respective to the information done by other parties. These can be, items that are like an incredible no-brainer over what the judge has done. So how this is going to expand out on policies, if you can get a hold of the disclosures that I made, then you would understand, or a copy of the actual documents or one of the documents, then you'd understand the mindset behind the material of what I was working with. Some of the material respective on some of those items dealt with material effectively archive material, in which basically there was multiple forms of chemical exposure and contamination, effectively acid, corrosive. So you're talking basically, the short note here, the layman's level is you have acid on archive, and there's no excuse for parties under any situation to basically take time, deny, or allow excuses. Those are specifically mentioned in the Constitution and Articles. When you have an archives coming under attack or being damaged by various parties come with the death penalty. So when you have people that are trying to apply modern law, they're making not just mistakes, there's no excuse for it. There's no excuse for a judge not to know the Constitution and not to know the Articles. That's their profession. They're supposed to know that. So when you get to some items such as no-brainers, a no-brainer is acid on archival material. That's a no-brainer. Emergency management budgets have to be granted, no matter what. It doesn't matter what the format is. It doesn't matter if you have somebody comes in and they run an archive and they're a member of the Special Olympics, and they said, well, we don't understand what they're talking about. I think that the judge would be able to read out enough fragments to understand the situation, especially since there's generally additional public information and or government notes that would explain other things happening regionally. So there's no excuse, because a judge is supposed to be of superior knowledge and also supposed to assist in situations that are definitely a concern of the Constitution of the United States and covered. So I give no slack in that area. There's no such thing as an error in law in many of these areas. People want to claim it's an error in law. No, it's not an error in law. It's downright criminal action. So again, I have the policy. I hate to use the word policy, but so to speak, but that nobody is above the law, and that high things are expected of people that are with superior knowledge. That's because that's your specialized training area. If you're saying that that is specifically your life's specialized training area, you're supposed to be real sharp. And when you are with agencies, you are basically with afforded powers of extended financial options and extended access to superior knowledge referencing. So slack in these areas, forget it. You're supposed to know better. Concepts of items being no-brainers and immediately ruling from the bench. I mean, I'm talking about items to make a decision on this hour. Not this day, this hour, because they're just such no-brainers. So I'll probably track on some of that and some of the things that various judges did. You have people that are being harassed. You have people that are being arrested. You have people that are having their vehicles seized, that are being put into great financial difficulty because they're a victim. They're a victim of a man-made disaster. And then they're being told that their insurance is expired. That's not possible. There's an automatic coverage clause respective to the law. So I don't want to hear about judges, especially judges of non-record, courts of non-record, doing convictions on people for instance, loss of insurance. I will prosecute them. My policy will be to prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law. That's a no-brainer area. There's no excuse for that. Kiss your job goodbye. Kiss your retirement goodbye. There's no excuse for that. That's a no-brainer. You have people that are victimized. They're victims. They need assistance, not to be picked on, not to be intimidated, not to be coerced. So I have a zero tolerance in that area. Entrapment issues involving items of entrapment. People have all their business shut down, and then they're being told they're doing something wrong, and they're going to be fined because they're not paying for something, or they're going to have vehicles impounded. Okay, very big criminal action there that I will be prosecuting judges in those areas. There's no excuse for that. These parties are victims. They need financial assistance this hour. They don't need people entrapping them and leaving them in an entrapment and basically stealing from them, threatening them, coercing them, allowing parties to use political skullduggery. I have no patience for that. Prosecutions of parties that are government employees that involve themselves in rebellious activity and skullduggery, sabotage. These types of items I will deal very harshly with. Don't expect slack. In many cases, people will never have a job ever again in government. Because certain items, when you go through and see what somebody actually did, they're an ongoing threat and can never be trusted again around sensitive areas. And I don't have much of a patience on that at all, because we're looking at determinations where parties went out of their way to do the wrong thing when we have insurrection and rebellion and foreign intrusion of various types of espionage, sabotaging people's lives on mass scales. So I have very little tolerance to people who are looking at situations where parties are in need and then they are making excuses. Especially when, this is dereliction, this is other crimes committed. I have little patience there. Nobody's above the law. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about AI. Now, language models are something that's going to basically be deployed at multiple levels throughout the justice system, throughout the courts. There will no longer be such a thing as a court of non-record. It'll effectively be deemed illegal. There must be recordings of what's transpiring in the court so that people have a reference point. And the effective understanding here is we're also dealing with what? Insurrection, rebellion, and forms of espionageal invasion. It's at a mass level. Espionageal invasion is at a mass level. And I'm not going to allow anybody to say otherwise, because it is. That's reality. There's ways we're going to be able to deal with this. So having an understanding where we need lots of AIs means that we're having all lines are going to be recorded. We're going to be implementing different levels of AI and law AIs. Now, I realize that the implementation is going to be quite a process because it's going to make mistakes. Okay, it's not truly ready yet. It's going to make mistakes with some of these systems that have already other people have been developed. My system that would have probably been the best, but unfortunately, it's in shambles at the moment. So there's a lot of levels that this is going to be implemented. This can be done in many ways because some AIs are so small they'll fit in a phone. You can get multiple AIs. There's AIs small enough that you can get 4 of them running simultaneously in a telephone. So you're going to have different levels of oversighting. Line is recorded. You're answering phones. You get a localized copy that's your personal copy. That's you keeping track of your daily material. You have a different type of logging that's in the computer that stays. Then you also have a copy that goes out to the room head. Your supervisor gets that and controls that. Then you have another copy that's made simultaneously that is the building's copy. Then there's another split copy that goes to headquarters. And then there can be additional request taps depending upon situations so that you can have agents granted special rights to be able to look in on situations and see what might be there. All transactions are recorded. All transactions are typed. All transactions are going to be AI assisted, AI accompanied. This can be looked upon in many areas where we might have to experiment it because we do have the master breach situation. So we might decide to do multiple overlapping AIs and they're subcompartmentally controlled. So there's a lot of ways to look at this and do this in different areas in different ways. This is something that's it's a top the table item. It has to be worked with more. We also have special circumstances. We have special modules. All of these different things that have to be considered on an individual basis. But I effectively want to make sure that everybody is recording their actions. Now, I also want to implement something else. Some people may not like it. It's basically a device that monitors your acuity, so to speak. What it does is it monitors your brain waves from a standpoint that a doctor could look at it, a psychiatrist or even a sociologist or a technician could look at it and say, your brain pattern is erratic or your brain pattern has a lot of dull points, almost as though you're in depression. So this deals with a health situation. People have bad days. People deal with lots of stress. This is something that affects job performance. And I don't expect anybody to be perfect. Forget being perfect, but there are reasonable areas to understand. So if people are having problems, especially if they're fielding phone situations and field phone connection, this can be a tremendous problem because somebody calling in, that might be the only communication that you get that indicates that there's another piece of a situation connected to it. And the person calling in may not have a clue what is actually transpiring. They might be a victim of espionage and not even know it. So intake lines are very crucial. Other ideas dealing with the importance and understanding deal with agents think they know everything. Oh, this guy said he was researching faster than light communication. He hangs the phone up on the guy. Okay, kiss your job goodbye. I don't care what they said they're working on. Okay, I don't care whether or not you think they're a nut. Okay, first of all, auto-second technology is real, and anybody can make headway on any given area. Private scientists and their papers have to be protected. They're also the equivalent as though archivers, and they have to be protected. I will not stand for people hanging up the phone because you don't like the way they talk, or you don't like what they're working on, or you don't like their situation. Well, they don't sound credible. Gee, could they be under stress because they're under attack by forces unknown? Excuse me. You're supposed to have better conduct than that. I will not have parties inventing political skullduggery and ignoring the possibility of services. If there's not enough budget available or services or people to roll on situations, we have to deal with that. And admitting to the American public that, in my view, from the investigation that I've done, that the departments are underfunded and do not have enough staff to roll. Sorry, that's clear as day, and it has to be addressed and will be immediately addressed with my administration. I will be looking upon also transitional ideas, and again, I am available for input. Okay, continuing with, my view is this: that we have insurrection, mass rebellion, and we have mass infiltrations, both foreign and domestic, at an espionage level. And it's been that way for a very long time. We're going to clean that up. Okay, now this is some of the items that you're going to expect, that you should expect out of my administration. One of the things we're going to be doing is all agents and all workers are going to be basically issued a briefcase or an extra briefcase. This case, this container, is going to contain things in the case. It's going to contain several different types of cell phones. Now, many of these cell phones are cheap cell phones. They're like people get as the government phone. These are practically $5 wholesale manufactured phones. Okay, these phones are going to have a way that they're worked upon where they can be activated. Some are already pre-activated and some are not activated. Some of them can be activated in the field, which means that you have an untraceable phone, other than the fact that someplace in the control sequence, when they're acquired and purchased, the serial number involving that phone is listed. So that's a private matter, that's a secure matter behind lockup. But these are going to be, these cases are going to be issued. There's reasons to have these cases. The reasons for these cases is the aforementioned. We're in an insurrection and mass rebellion, and we have mass spying. So there's several different ways this can happen. Phone changeouts in the field on demand. Okay, this is going to be able to deal with situations where possibly somebody is tapping into situations already, maybe ongoing, and maybe there's ongoing investigation, or maybe it's a fresh situation, and the fresh situation is going to be on your discretion of whether you want to switch out. So there are different ways to do these switch out. This is a top-of-the-table item to be discussed and looked at and worked with. This can have individual modifiers as to the structure of each type of situation involving what type of packages would be arranged for what type of people. I want all workers to have cases that have something in them, because this gives the diversity at any given point to be able to make changes and do activations. It's also a way to look at different types of opportunity. Now, the way this partially works is everything is also going to be recorded. there's different methods of recording things. We're going to talk about that right now. One of them is that we're going to have apps right in the phones where everything's recorded. Everything that you do is recorded. Now, there's different levels of software. The business about everything has to go across the internet to the home company or this or that or the home application people. No. No, this is private stuff unless otherwise deemed. Otherwise deemed may be that, yes, it goes to a brand new line setup that has been protected and reserved. So when you alternate, you're going into a different setup situation, having ultimate security involving these situations. All rooms are recorded at home base. All situations have a tight security. So I want you to keep in mind, if you're changing things over, you have to make special types of notes of it. And AI is basically going to be present as assistive tooling. I'm sorry, at first a lot of it's going to be junk, but there's going to be different levels available to everybody. The idea is that you have two types of recording. Let's say you're going to do voice note and you're going to allow the AI to write up your text and do the text conversion. Both your voice are recorded separately. It also might have a relay where there's a relay of that recording going elsewhere. But then you have the voice to text that's going to convert everything and keep automatically saving those files. Those files may also be uploaded or switched to another location or not. So this is an important thing to understand. So if you do change outs, there has to be a reason for it. Now you can just say, I don't know why, I just had this notion, I just thought it was the best thing to do. Okay, that can happen. You know, we're going to roll with this. I'm not going to rule out completely instinct unless somebody has stated otherwise and says, I don't care what your instinct is. At the moment, no change outs without following this decided procedure right here, whatever. So again, atop the table, open to management discussions on because there can be a lot of individual variances, and that is what is definitely atop the table to be worked with for situational whatever understanding. Okay, now the cell phones at different levels. You're going to have some of the cheaper cell phones. Those are emergency handout telephones. You know, this means that you could be seeing somebody in the field that doesn't have a phone, and all of a sudden you suspect that they're victims in one way or another, and you can just hand that phone out and say, here you go, boom. So, and when you're doing that, you're doing a recorded AI situation that you've handed that phone to these people. Now, hopefully the information is correct. So this can either be a live phone that's working online, ready to go, or one that they have to call and set up. So there's different ways that this can work. Now, there's a lot of reasons for this. Number one, I want victims to be able to have phones. I especially like the idea that they're going to have a phone that's not necessarily already being monitored, because we don't know exactly what level of victim that they are. We don't know how they're sourced. We don't know if they're being used or how they're being used. So I want the availability at the very least for ultra cheap phones to be on demand available. They're cheap. When we're booking people's time at $300 an hour, and the concept of a $5 phone comes up, I don't even want to hear negative arguments against it. I'm serious. I don't even want to hear negative budget arguments because it's a $5 phone. You know, so having a mechanism to make this efficient atop the table, yes, we want to do this. Now, also, because there are lots of different types of things that can happen, and these are going to be atop the table worked on tactically, okay, because there's a lot of scenarios that people are not necessarily going to be understanding on how different types of mass cyber attacks work, how mass cyber attacks in conjunction with espionage can be working, and those keep changing. There's a lot more to that. That can get very deep, Very, very, very deep. So basically, that's atop the table. There are all these different reasons. Also, if agents are in the field, you're going to run into people. You can very easily be in a situation where you run into people that they're basically poor, they're homeless someplace. Now, you may or may not have time to attend to it. I don't necessarily want people spending a bunch of time making themselves vulnerable to a situation. But if, for instance, you're trying to get information, and instead of handing somebody a business card, you're handing somebody a cell phone and a business card that says, yeah, we're looking for people that witnessed or may have witnessed something on a certain date or yada yada, certain person. Here's a cell phone. Now, there's no excuse that they can't make a call and make a secure call. That's part of the reason, again, is all of this sets up, at least for a temporary, in theory, temporarily a secure call situation. So there's that. The other thing is if you run into a situation in the field and you see a bunch of homeless people, there's nothing wrong with handing a few devices for communication out because they cost $5. Don't spend a lot of time on it, just hand them out. Now, how are they traced? We take care of that another way. That's another atop the table item that gets managed and looked at another way. So, efficiency, yes. So, another thing that's going to effectively be in effect in these cases is there's going to be a series of credit cards. These are predetermined accounts. They have predetermined amounts of money on them. Many of them effectively are going to be color-coded. For instance, you might have one set of color and there's a tag on it. It's basically an account worth $150. It's generally enough money for somebody to go get a room and some food so they can get cleaned up. Okay, these things come in handy to deal with basically common decency if you run into homeless people. These are icebreakers. These are things that are important, and there are a lot of people that generally need those anyhow. The idea here is that there's a lot of ways that this is important. I don't think a lot of people understand. We can have a big cyber attack, and then all of a sudden, we don't know what to do. Communication's not working, and now what? Do we have a nuclear weapon go off? I don't know. So, yeah, having pre-made situations done ahead of time where there's no reason, there's no excuse not to have various options when, in my book, what this cost is peanuts. Now, there can be additional handouts. Different styles of different packages can be handed out and will be available. Under my administration, I want to see this happen basically at every level. This means that police officers in cities will basically have briefcases. Maybe they're in the trunk, maybe they're small, maybe they're with them in the ride, maybe they're mounted, whatever. Maybe they got a small mounted one, maybe they got a relief thing in the trunk. There's a bunch of cards in it. They can hand these cards out to people that are homeless. And this is not to say that they need to do a bunch of reports on it, but everything's going to become AI assisted. So in other words, it's recorded. The guy drives through an area. There's a bunch of people that are homeless. Okay, half of them are drunk and they smell bad. Hand these cards out. Go get a room. Get cleaned up. Get yourself something to eat. Having this ability to do on the quick. You don't have to get out of the vehicle. Okay, we have a lot of situations where parties already run around. They've got dash cams. They've got recorders. These people have been recorded repeatedly over and over again. And they go into these areas, and we have these situations with pandemic problems, with other problems. We still have a floating pandemic problem. So giving the ability to officers in the field to hand out money, but it's recorded and AI assisted. In other words, they handed it out. Well, it's on video right there. He handed it out to a homeless person. Okay, what did he do? He gave a blue card with a red stripe. Okay, that was $150, whatever. Okay, now, there's different levels. You could go down to small levels. for officers in the field. You could have a $20 card, you could have a this or that or whatever, to where somebody can go get a meal or whatever. So this type of emergency preparedness, pre-preparation, makes all the sense in the world. But then at different levels, you have real reasons why you want to have these types of card setups. There's various numbers of increments on these cards that are available. There can be a lot more money. There can be $5,000 on a card. Now, again, you have to account for this. So when you're doing your card, your case itself, when it opens up, everything's recorded. As you close it, it's still recorded, which means everything is counted in its slot where it's at. Okay? So when you reach in and you pull an item, you've got a recorder on you that more than likely is going to see you pulling the card. Okay, you're doing it for a reason. You're going to pull the card and you're going to issue it. So this is, again, we're talking about insane oversighting, recording, accountability. Why? It's cheap. It's peanuts. Cameras and recorders are peanuts. Seriously. In theory, you could hand these things out practically like candy, and you don't have to do any paperwork. Why? The AI is doing paperwork. The cameras are being traced. Everything's being scanned. The AI is doing all of that paperwork, basically. So, can the AI make mistakes? Yes, it can. You can sit there and say, and it says, "Oh, we've made this whole thing. Can you do your sign or your signal or your symbol or whatever, certifying it?" And you could read through it. Maybe you don't have time to read through the whole thing, or maybe you start looking through it, and you go, "You're misspelling words." You immediately make a note and say, "I can't read all of this. I have other duties today." But you have misspelled words. It doesn't quite look right. I can't give clear certification. But obviously, a document has been prepared. All I'm stating is that the AI did perform something. So this is going to partially, as transition goes, leave people off the hook for having to do too much reading and oversighting. We're going to be working with this paperwork along in different ways and finding different ways to simplify it. Could end up becoming a series of symbols that become like really incredibly simple. So again, the idea is there's going to be all of this stuff, multi-overlapping cameras and AI. The idea is it's hands-free. Do not allow it to interfere with your job performance. You just keep doing your job like you normally would do it. The idea is that it's supposed to eventually be able to simplify your job enormously, and basically have that accountability in it. And a lot of it is this is what I see as my administration, that we're going through a transitional phase, and this transitional phase means that there's an acclimation that has to occur. And part of this acclimation is realizing that some people might be discovered that they're becoming manic depressants, or they're going to have other different psychological situations. These have to be dealt with respectfully. And with great respect, we have to show respect. And many of these items have to come with an automatic medical understanding. And these can deal with a lot of issues that could be private matters. And that's going to be between you and your doctor. Now, even if it's affecting your job performance, again, the idea here is I recognize that, again, people are not perfect. People are not perfect, and we have to be able to have the human understanding and human compassion that people are not perfect and they're just going through life, and we're just acclimating with the situation. So this is important. The idea is to minimize or record anything that would be obviously of important consequence, like somebody was doing their job and all of a sudden a bunch of guys pull up in a van and kidnap them, and that's all we got. What happened here? Wait a minute, So this is something that we talked about on top of the table. And there's a lot of different reasons. You can have somebody that you hired and all of a sudden, You don't know what happened to them. They turned into a maniac and just started killing people. Why did that happen? Well, everybody's dead now, apparently, including the shooter, which was a cop or an agent or whatever. But a doctor turns around and says, we do have a little oddball chemical discovery, and so more intensive testing's done, and someone says, we don't know how it happened. Somebody slipped this person some kind of really strange psychoactive material, and it made them go nuts. Okay, all right, I guess that happened. So we have to be prepared for anything that can possibly happen. Tactics keep changing, mindsets keep changing, threats keep changing, and we have to address an all-encompassing policy of things that can happen, regardless of the origin or what they might be. So we have to keep an open mind, and this is something that has to be atop the table at all times, even if we got it slid over at a corner, So now our tactical tables are getting confusing. It's like someone looks at it and says, is this a gambling thing here? You've got all these chips and chits and notes and stuff there, and it's going to almost look more like it's a casino table, but it's a tactical table. These are items that are working for different types of things. And these things are going to change. We're going to be going from primitive tactical tables to more advanced tactical tables, and this is going to become more of a routine. People are going to get paid extra for this. Let me see, where are we at? I got a lot of notes. I got a lot of things I still want to go into. I can't get into them right now, but I want to go back into different morale aspects. As all of this is being implemented, there's also going to be informational sharing. Okay, I'm going to have mandatory informational sharing with each and every person, no matter what level your department is, whether this is at all departments, all levels, whether you're like local law enforcement or local fire department or local social worker or whatever, county, city, state, federal, whatever. So there's going to be this disclosure rating as a lot of things are getting implemented, because basically I believe I've talked in several other items about this in different ways, and one of them recently I talked about the disclosure of information that's captured. We have captured information where people have extensive libraries that were basically captured that are handmade libraries. These are their archives of material for their business tactics. But they got caught in a RICO, and everything associated with their business was deemed an instrument of crime. So, and there's other reasons why certain things got captured, surrendered, or whatever. So there's this massive amount of information that for decades and decades and decades has been going into boxes. It's just been going into boxes. And this brilliant type of information for tactical thinking on investment is hidden. Well, this has to be disclosed, and it's going to need to be disclosed, and it's going to need to be disclosed at various levels for people. And we're actually going to have to pay people a certain amount of money and say, we're going to pay you for your time because you're going to come up to date. You have to come up to date because there's a lot of different reasons why you might need to know some of this information. A lot of people might be asking you questions about it. It could be a coworker. You could be someone in the field and someone's asking information about it. And I consider under my administration that people have an obligation to pass out some sort of information. This can be a lot of things that get passed out to anybody. And some of this information is going to be connected into cell phone devices, different types of devices. Again, we're having a new sequence of cost lowering that are going to be continuously occurring with cell phones. So cell phones are going to be passed out like they're candy chips, and they're going to be connected to all kinds of other information and services and explanations. So this is something that can simplify things, for many people to say, oh yeah, well that's here. Let me give you this. There's a lot of information here. Boom, there you go. So I don't want to worry about peanuts. I want mass upgrade of productivity across the board nationwide. So when we're paying employees to say, we want you to come up to speed and understand all of this disclosure that's going to be occurring, we want you to understand that your life is being upgraded. Everybody's life is going to be upgraded. We're going to be increasing productivity. So there's a lot to this productivity upgrade. There's going to be a lot of disclosure because there's a lot of items that occur that are unfair. There's a lot of corruption that's occurred in the past where the government has given high dollar services to certain companies that in many cases don't exist anymore, that basically got a very unfair advantage, and these people made a lot of money and or disappeared or whatever. And meanwhile, the average citizen got nothing and is at a disadvantage. And these are going to be numerous. I mean numerous. People have no idea how many instances of these things have occurred. So a collective sorting of these types of items becomes an AI archive to help assist you in understanding what type of new options are out there. And I've talked in the material, if you catch it, I've talked about home building, new home building guaranteed loans. Ideally, you need a project. You don't know how to build, fine. You just pretend that you're the developer and we're going to help you get a contractor and get it done. But it's nice if you can take some of the work yourself. It's really good pay, So having this works out to a statistical average nationwide of at least $90,000 on average. I'm not going to say that some of it might come out smaller. I'm just saying that I've only had a limited amount of time over the years. I only did limited samplings. It should be at least 90,000. So that's an asset acquisition. If you took some of the work, that's a bonus beyond that. So your income, everybody's income effectively in this country has an opportunity to raise $90,000 per year in asset acquisition. Now, this is a good thing. This is an important thing. There's a lot of aspect areas to try to understand this, why we need to understand this. We can compare the international. We have the international understanding of commerce and various types of competitiveness of citizens collectively of other countries. And other countries are having citizens that are moving forward with assets in a big way. And some of this even happened during COVID. There's there was this item I ran into during COVID where the Japanese government decided that that statistically they needed to come out with a fair number amongst their civilians. They were basically handing out $140,000 a year as COVID assistance. And somebody had apparently taken this $140,000 and they went to South America and they were buying houses with it and then renting the houses out. So these people were basically coming up. They decided to use the situation to go on a remote location and invest the money as they went and live on the cheap. And they upgraded their lives tremendously in that little tiny micro scenario. Now, this means that there's other types of situations. We have citizens that are gaining assets all over the world, including China. There's a mass asset upgrade, even in China for citizens. So we can't have a country here at home in the United States where we keep doing this ridiculous amount of wage slaving. I'm going to talk about that for a minute because we need to talk about it. People keep missing it. They don't have time. Sorry you don't have time, but this is high-end information for the most part, specific to different types of people, but it's high-end. It's necessary. Okay, 1750, the average 12 to 14-year-old could build a house in 2 months to 6 months. 38-year longevity, 30 house output lifetime. 1850 slave is 28 to 33 years of age longevity and about a 20 house output equivalent productivity, whether or not it was realized. Now, modern, because we have modern tools, the modern situation now is 78 years longevity, 45 years of work that you're expected to work, And that translates out to 480 houses. 480 houses because of all the modern updates. So, and this is basic carpentry. We're talking fourth, fifth grader stuff here, people. Fourth, fifth, sixth grader stuff. Okay, that used to be in this country. So we have an area where a lot of this is basically on the no excuse level. People are no longer going to accept the status quo argument. They're going to start burning the cities down and saying we refuse to be slaves. And some of them that are going to be there are going to be your coworkers because they're pissed off and they're going to know the truth about this. So my administration is going to directly address max productivity and individual rights to produce hard assets for themselves. Number one, multiple homes development, because this has to be dealt with. We have different areas, like for instance, China. China has about 75 million structures that have been built that are unoccupied. These are apartments, these are houses, these are business buildings, these are warehouses. It's a big array. 75 million structures. So, those are still assets. They're worth something, and they're going to be acclimated into situations. I have a tactical table on that. That gets explained, mostly classified area for the big stuff. That's a different set of conversations. Very few people have checked in to get that. Anyhow, but effectively, we have to accept that we cannot help perpetuate yet again some other form of big lie and lie to our citizens and say that their output is not worth that minimum 480 houses for their lifetime of 78 years, 45 years of work. So we have to address this. I address this in my administration. I have a very robust plan to help move people forward. And the integration of AI, there has to be a lot of issues that can be addressed and heard, and a lot of efficient ways to collect those ideas as you have time. By the way, if you're at work and you have personal note time, something pops into your head, your AI assistive tooling can deal with that as well. That's the idea behind installing AI. Also, is that if you have a note, you go, oh, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, that's for yada yada. So I mentioned that. So as we implement the AI, again, someone may not have caught it, I have a 5 computer compensation package that I'm going to try to immediately be working on to get implemented upon entering the White House. We have to compensate people. And I talk about that, in other words, why that's justified, why there's a legal action behind that, why I would be partnering atop the table with the Justice Department and working with the understanding of why it's proper, why certain things occurred, why compensation must occur, why tactically we have to do this for our citizens. Okay, I know that we have the union matter. A lot of people have expressed different things to me. Why is it, $300 an hour is a generalized government employee addressing per hour cost. And sometimes it's more. People are going, hey, attorneys are $500, $600, $1,200 an hour. Judicial processing, 178 something or whatever per hour, official processing. So, what is this? There's a lot of people that feel at a union level that there's not a fair consideration. They're being cheated. So that's atop the table. I'm on board with this for morale. I'm going to admit, in my view, I can't disagree with that opinion. So we have a lot of negotiating room, and there's a lot of creative ways to do it. I've already talked about the mandatory, your labor is guaranteed bankable no matter what, and you have a lifetime ratio. That means that we have an investment guarantee ratio for hard asset generation. It's infallible when you go to the hard asset generation level. So we have to get that. It's number one. I have to get everybody solid. I consider that an immediate emergency prerequisite, and yes, the other aforementioned problems, we can have the insurrection, we can have the COVID, we can have all this pandemic stuff. So but trying to keep to the morale at the moment, and because there's personal rights that people have, and everybody's trying to negotiate for a better deal. And I'm not only completely on board about that, I'm looking at productivity, people. I'm looking at productivity. Now, yes, some people are service related, connected, but those services are important. By the way, a lot of those services required extra training. Okay, so we got to recognize this. But we can't sit there and discriminate against the basic carpentry factor of what we had back in 1750. Jigs up. Can't sit there and tell people this. So I am provisioning for mass upgrade, and that is looking at every person and saying, how productive are you? Okay, and let's focus on the win-win. Let's get you more productive. I want you self-productive, okay? I don't want you all stressed out going to the doctor and him giving you medication if your life doesn't necessarily require it from that aspect, and say, yeah, let's help repair the financial solidity of your life. So let's work on that very hard. That's a large series of tactical table options and different diversities that can happen, and hard construction is a base foundation for that. So it tracks. Then after that, we're tracking back to these other types of ideas or schemes or whatnot, and so there's a lot of different options that get really elaborate. Many people are like, can I just have a bigger garage and an extra shop, whatever I'm going to do in it. What do you like to do? I like to make clothing for girls' dolls. Okay, fine. Whatever you need that building for, whatever it is. But there's equipment productivity. There's new changes and longevity purchases. In other words, why be forced to purchase a metal drill press or lathe or longevous type of piece of equipment that's utilizable if you can finance it on a 30? I also have ideas for dealing with different financial situations on longer terms. There's a lot of other areas. You'll probably hear me talk about the eventual multi-overlapping insurance deal, where the insurance from one fund, in other words, your Social Security fund can be the insurer. In other words, the bank is going to get the money from the Fed, but the completion bond insurance factor is co-written by your Social Security account. Now you're talking about, a factor involving 1% or less of the loan, so, and the money doesn't have to necessarily be paid, it can be promised. So that means the back toe is that it's written up into the loan to be paid off itself. So you don't even have to pull a dime out of Social Security. It's backed at the end of the loan somewhere along the way. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't collectively happen. Again, we have it all wrapped up in the loan. There's a lot of different ways to do that with other different styles of accounts, like 7, 8, 9 ways to do this. So, are you on board always having, making 7 or 8, 9 structures? I don't want to hear somebody say, well, that's going to flood the market. Not really. No, it doesn't work that way. So, but we have to have the hard hazards. You can't sit there and all of a sudden get corrupt and say, no, that's going to flood the market and maybe make my house drop 5%. So screw it. Let's make a bunch of poor people. They can die in cardboard boxes. I'm not going to accept an anti-productivity attitude like that. Because, again, we're going to be looking at everybody. There's going to be productivity teams, by the way. I'm going to mention that on a side note here. There's going to be productivity teams. So we're going to put people together and say, your job is to drive around and make notes on who's not productive. And people are going to go, this is like weird. Is this like, 1984 stuff or something? No, seriously, finding people that are not productive and figuring out signatures on this. And we can do it from, you could do it from SAR even, basically. And then basically say, okay, we have to get these people productive. There's a whole series of ideas and situations that work with mainly departmental interest, where there are lectures, where there are scenarios, where there's invention. It's an ongoing top-of-the-table situation to say, how do we get various citizens to become productive? And so we have different levels. Instead of getting people to call in, we're going to have an actual there's going to be these other levels. But there's going to be a level where it's go out, find these people, and see what you can do. There's going to be a separate pull tap situation for independent people. It's a bounty. It's a bounty. Find people, become their advocate, get paid well to move these people forward and becoming productive again and making hard assets. So since every citizen is now a validated item for a hard asset, that opens up a new style of business. Can corruption happen? Of course it can happen. So again, that's top of the table for us to look at in that area. Now, alternating your duty shift items. In other words, if you say, yeah, I see somebody put the option on the board that I can spend a little bit of time learning about this and doing this and understanding the productivity field officer types, yes, definitely yes. And this is then adding diversity. This is upgrading you and your management skills. This is going to also get you a little bigger paycheck. And at the same time, we're diversifying. This is very important to getting us to a better, free and open capitalistic society that deals with max production. So my clock ticker says I have to conclude this. I'm at the end of a session sequence. Again, my name is Michael Crosby. I'm running for POTUS. I'm not withdrawing because why? I caught the other guys committing felonies. I don't have to withdraw. So I've declared the presidential candidate panel and moving forward with that, as well as doing the proper thing, trying to move forward on transition. It's behind at the level I want to get it implemented, but unfortunately, we have a lot of unusual circumstances that are delaying certain things because of COVID and our insurrection rebellion. So bear with me. Let's keep the right transitional ideas going because I want to stay in the loop with people, and I want people to be in the loop for the new implementing of the various AI, of the various ideas, and stay in the loop with the presidential candidate panel legalism aspect that is fully constitutional. So there's a lot of different reasons to understand this multi-entity campaign, association, election item, respectively. So I want to thank you for your time. Again, my name is Michael Crosby, running for POTUS.